All right, so let's take a look. Let's see if this improved it. All right, so here I'm going to do a quick walkthrough of the protocol design canvas. And there's an essay associated with this more in detail, but I want to get the basic ideas out. So uh, the center of everything is the objective function. I feel describing what is the purpose and treating it as a function that, as you can see, there might be some inputs that cause things to go down, some things that cause it to, go down, some things that cause it to go up. So I feel like putting that in its place and as a center really guides sort of a lot of the thinking, especially when we go from here to the modeling. I also felt it's also worth putting in here and know that it's connected, and if you see that it's not connected, the treasury, which is the service price, what is being offered? What's the purpose of the protocol? There's some service that's delivering, and there's a price for that. And then maybe that price is purely transactional, but in terms of, say, delivering gas or signing, so that's fine, but there still needs to be some dimension around that. And then some way to start thinking about the token price, which we know is going to be impacted by the tokens that are in circulation. So I felt, and also that token price affects maybe other things. So I thought putting that in there so that we could start to draw connections and associations. Then the primary one, which is on the demand side, which I think there's always something really interesting, you can always do more with this, is who are the customer personas? Who's actually going to use the protocol? Who is the person that is the customer to the protocol? And I often feel like sometimes that gets lost, and without knowing who is the customer, who's going to want to use it, and unless you have some version that is sustainable without anyone paying for it, with no revenue for that customer that they are willing to pay out of pocket to put into the ecosystem, I think you're not going to have sustainability. So then I said, well, what are things that align with the customer? And I might change what those are, but those are really more incentives. A customer that's using something, does it align with them that the price goes down the more that they use it? Is there alignment in terms of if they have, and for example, let's use this data indexing example. If they have queries they want to index that really there's a market dynamic that drives the prices or even drives people to help create the indexing of the data that they want if it doesn't exist already. Demand functions are things that I would consider functions that are going to drive the demand and I think kind of contribute to maximizing this. And so I didn't really tie those two together as tightly as I did because they really should come from the customer, but perhaps there's something to tie in. So for example, the more customers they are, the more they spend, the longer they stay. All those things might drive the objective function. And so getting very explicit around those helps us to understand, what downstream they may be. So let's say, again, we go back to indexing. Perhaps a first order bit is the number of data sources of other blockchain networks. That's going to drive the most number of customers who come on, but only if for every network that joins, X number of people end up joining per month. And then you can start to examine, well, are there enough demand functions on there to do that? So, that's kind of how I'm setting up the right-hand side, is everything kind of drives this way, sort of this direction. And the left side is the supplier. So in the case of, say, data indexing, it's going to be the indexers. They're the ones who are actually providing the data. They're running the systems that are going to index everything. So they have a set of incentives. So here you can start to say, well, many of them are incentivized by token acquisition. And so they care about the rise in the price, but they also care about actually receiving more tokens, as you kind of got to figure about how that occurs. Some of it also might be driven by the service price. If the price is too low, that affects incentives because we know that service price could adversely affect the token price. And those things go in terms of supplier alignment. And again, I'm trying to figure out, is there a difference between incentives versus the alignment? Like, here's just aligning with what do they care about? What are the things that will make them want to stay with the system, support the system? So some of them could be there's a belief system, but there could also be kind of like related to the incentives. The incentives align them to become more profitable. I added this alignment section just recently because of some material that I was reading saying, well, alignment need to consider, and those aren't the same as actually incentivizing with functions. I'm going to come back and probably evaluate that at another time. Then there's the actual protocol work, and I feel like you can start to talk about who are the personas of the core developers and what motivates them. And then same with the GTM. These are people who are neither customers nor suppliers primarily. Now they could be, but in addition, they actually work on the protocol itself. So how do you incentivize, or what are the motions that they agree upon around core GTM and then development? What's that coordination look like? What's the incentive look like? And then the last one that I thought was, what are the actual values? What do they want to achieve? What are some things that maybe put this objective function in check? So a common one will be decentralization, and they may define that as the decentralization of staking, or the decentralization of the number of indexers, right, over here. That's very important. That may be something you put as a value, as a constraint to an objective function, because the objective function may end up, if it's just sort of designed, have as many queries as possible, have as much data go through as possible, and it may, without putting that as a value, may actually be fine and perhaps a maxima if all the indexing gets concentrated in a handful of people, or all the staking gets aligned. And so that needs to be kind of like put in here so that you can add that in as a functional constraint to the objective function, and then write that in the contract. So this is like the first pass that I thought about in terms of what is a protocol design canvas, to put your thoughts, align people on the conversations, think about what they put into each section, to design everything, and then ultimately start to actually how you would codify what is the core objective function. Meaning not just putting it in words. It might be words, but thinking about them numerically. So maximizing the volume of data indexed. So is that total? Is that on a monthly cadence? What does that mean as a function? So that's my first pass on the protocol design canvas. Let me know in the comments what you think, what you change, your own thoughts.